Who's your Vladdy?
See? Come on.
See?
This is gold. My name is Brittlestar. Not really.
And I'm Sandy Garacino. Really.
And this is Canada Watching U.S. News. Well, hi again. Thanks for watching and or listening to Canada Watching U.S. News. And we have three things we're going to talk about this week, hopefully, if all goes well. We've had some minor tech problems.
Just little ones.
Just little ones. It all started when Sandy threw her laptop on the kitchen floor in a rage.
I was excited.
Well,
I was excited to see you, Stuart.
Well, exactly.
And then I couldn't see you at all because my laptop was on the floor.
Well, this is a lesson in restraining yourself and, controlling your emotions, which is...
And buying Apple Care Plus. Excuse me for this plug, but this is the only warranty that I ever pay for. And it worked.
That's pretty good. Did you ever used to buy did you have Future Shops out in BC? I can't remember if you did or not.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Did you ever get the extended warranty for anything out there at all?
I didn't, because I always considered extended warranties to be, in general, a scam.
Yeah, right? Because there'd always be you thought there'd be some reason they'd say no.
But when you're paying 4 figures for your tech stuff, get it.
Exactly. Get it. Get that Apple Care. Anyway, let's start talking about stuff. So the episode title this week is Trump's Booty Calling Putin, which sounds like a country song, while Harris shoots her shot in the media.
Oh, boy. Oh, sorry.
There's lots of good puns there. I mean, at least one good pun.
I've worked in some tough bars and Okay, Stuart.
All right, so let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is Bob Woodward's got an upcoming book called War. And the big scuttlebutt about what's been released about the book so far is the fact that Donald Trump had about 7 phone calls with Putin after he left office. So just, buddy calls, one of which was at Mar-a-Lago, at least one of which was at Mar-a-Lago. And of course, the calls weren't made public. Now, I don't know what the law is in the States as far as if, once you've been a president, do you have to make that kind of thing public all the time afterwards? I'm not sure.
There is a whole Logan Act. I actually didn't look up the legality, but there is a whole Logan Act about being in contact with foreign leaders, foreign governments, and just everything that you have to do that's foreign. I think there needs to be disclosure and foreign agent registry, all of that, the FARA, all of that kind of thing, which all sounds very technical, and it is, and I haven't read it, so we don't know.
But it sounds
bad.
Reasonable.
It's bad. Well, for one thing, regardless of what the law is, Stuart, has been Putin's bitch for 9 years.
Yeah.
He's been all that, Putin says jump and Trump is how high. He's, Putin is Donald's daddy here. And we all know, so regardless of what the law is or should be, this is just a horrific scandal. I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't break the law when she put her emails on a former president's very secure server that never did get hacked.
Right.
So but apparently it was a scandal enough that it had to be on the front pages for an entire presidential campaign. But we've already forgotten about these Pooty calls.
Pooty calls. That would have been a better pun.
Pooty calls.
Damn it. Where were you when I wrote this the other day?
I didn't know. I was doing tech support.
Probably. So yeah, I mean, it seems obvious there should be something in place, and it's not good when a former president is cozying up to someone like Putin, because he's obviously, as you said, it feels like and seems like he's been pulling the strings with Trump for quite a while.
Who's your Vladdy?
See? Come on.
See?
This is gold.
That's what you pay me the big bucks for.
That's right, exactly.
But it's not only that these calls were made. He was making these calls from Mar-a-Lago or wherever he made them from. He had those classified documents.
Yeah.
There is still, to this day, they cannot locate, and it was in Trump's possession the last time it was seen, a massive 10-inch thick binder on Russian intelligence and the sources and methods of their gaining intelligence, which means we're talking about agents. We're talking about American agent identities and Russian agents and Russian intelligence. And Trump is in possession of that stuff. Last time anybody's seen it, it's disappeared. It's incredibly sensitive, and he's on the frickin' phone. He's probably taking screenshots of it.
Oh yeah, guaranteed.
And texting it over to Pooty. And then he has Orban over to Mar-a-Lago too. I mean, this is just ridiculous.
It's funny because the classified documents thing was so shocking, and the photos that came out of the documents kind of in weird places at his bathroom and all that kind of stuff was just bizarre, super bizarre. But it was so bizarre, and in keeping with Trump's whole thing, is that it was like one more bizarre thing, in that it didn't it was like, what's next? It's not even a case of what's next. It's more a case of it's all, you're incredulous all the time, and that's difficult to maintain, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the whole. I mean, that's the Bannon strategy of flood the zone, right? Like, it get to the point where everybody's just exhausted, and oh yes, our president of the United States is actually a foreign agent for our major adversary, but he gives good speeches sometimes.
Sometimes. The other part of the claims were that Trump had secretly sent COVID-19 testing machines to Putin during the pandemic, with Putin asking to keep the exchange quiet. Which is, I mean, okay. I mean, Bob Woodward's a reputable guy. He's like,
Yes.
He's been around for a while, and of course, he was part of the whole Watergate, breaking the Watergate thing with Nixon, and he's a reliable guy. I don't know how he gets these stories, but when someone like Bob Woodward releases this kind of information, my first assumption is, well, it's accurate.
It's accurate.
It's accurate.
And then of course, Trump says that he made it all up. Like, it's so hilarious. Donald Trump saying that Bob Woodward made it all up, and then the Kremlin releases a statement that says, no, it's true.
Did they really? I didn't know that.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Oh my God.
Yes, they did. They confirmed.
So, I mean, does that not suggest that Trump's ended his usefulness to the Kremlin, essentially? Because I've always thought if he's faced with dire consequences, Trump's going to take off to Russia.
No, he's not. He's going to, like, Trump's been faced with dire consequences for 50 fucking years. What are you talking about?
Okay.
Nothing ever happens to him. So I'll be amazed if anything does.
He's going to skate through this as well, this whole thing.
But he is extremely useful to Putin if he gets elected. Why? You know the answer to that.
Sure.
Why?
Because he'll be president. He'll have his ability and NATO, right? Yeah.
Ukraine, pull off. We're out. Take it. Go take it, Vladimir. Right. We're taking the jets out. Where you can, yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, the COVID-19 thing and Putin saying, keep this quiet, buddy. Listen, buddy, don't tell anybody. It's hilarious to me because
it's like, shh, Donald.
Yeah. One of the things I know you're great at is keeping secrets. So if you could just do that. I don't want this to be very embarrassing for me, because it is embarrassing for Putin. I mean, that's the whole thing with Russia. I think so, because Russia is supposed to be this, they still claim to be a superpower and very affluent and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I see. I see where you're going.
And then to ask for COVID-19 testing machines.
Yeah, that means that Russia's science and Russia's machines aren't so good.
Exactly.
Right.
Because why does he want them?
Yeah. Yeah. So but we don't hear him be quiet about, but all the other things that we're talking about.
Well, exactly.
Be quiet about showing me those classified documents that show the names of the agents in the Kremlin that gave up the information.
And I mean, on a serious note, that's obviously very dangerous for those people. Like this real lives on the line type stuff, which is scary stuff.
They are, and we know that he's got an extraterritorial assassination program in place. Like, people are in real danger.
Yeah, I mean, Putin doesn't mess around. That's for sure. What was the name of the fellow who was poisoned in the cafe? and
Oh,
died. I've lost his name.
yeah, it's L something. I'm forgetting it right now.
Yeah. But I remember that whole thing happening, and actually it just came to mind because I was thinking of on a trip to the UK. I remember going to Highgate Cemetery, and he's buried there.
Yes.
But it makes you realize when I don't know, it seems silly, but going to his gravesite and you go, oh my God, that was that guy. And like,
yeah,
this really happened.
And there he is. Wow.
That's scary stuff.
Wow.
But that all said, with all these revelations, does anybody care about this? Like, is this going to make a hill of beans at all?
So we can get into, and later on we're going to get into the whole Kamala strategy and some of these things. I think it actually does. Because I think that one of the big issues that Kamala's got to start putting, like, really laying the groundwork for, and she has started this. You could see it in some of the interviews of, Trump is really dominated, because it's so much of Trump's appeal is that he's the dominant male, right? Like he's the big he-man, which is so weird because he is the most submissive man that I have ever seen. All anybody has to do around him is show a frickin' spine, and the guy caves. Even the dictator of North Korea, which is a tin pot dictatorship, except for their Russians, except for their nuclear program. But, this is a guy that caves in the face of strength. He really does. He does all his, but he is really submissive. And I think that with the right kind of framing, this can really undercut it. And they'll start to get their messaging around that. But I also think, you remember, and we'll talk more about this, that there is a large community of the never Trumpers, and those people. And I think, you look at somebody like a Liz Cheney, like all of those things just start to sink in. And it may not change someone from a Trump voter to a Harris voter, but they may change someone from a Trump voter to a non-voter.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I don't think anyone was necessarily surprised at this stuff. When that information came out about the phone calls and stuff, I wasn't like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, that tracks. That seems like something you would do for sure. So it's not that it's going to be surprising to anyone, but it sort of feels like the fact that it's Bob Woodward's name behind these allegations that make it kind of more concrete and add some weight to it. Much in the same way as you're saying about, about Cheney and stuff, and how they're gradually coming over to support Kamala, and that tips the scales. Literally, it adds more weight, and this is maybe that as well. So, what is there? Do we think there's any reason to be concerned about these phone calls, or is this just not really any reason? There's reason to be concerned, but beyond what we already are concerned about.
Well, ever since the whole classified documents thing erupted in 2022, 2 years ago, it's extremely concerning, and it's concerning from a global intelligence point of view. You just don't know what he's in possession of. He could have Canadian agent identities and sources and methods. Sources and methods this was a whole thing about not disclosing even the Steele dossier, which was just raw intelligence, and raw intelligence, as we know, and as turned out to be the case in a lot of that, but not all of the Steele dossier, is just not accurate. A lot of it is just gossip and rumors, and just idle chatter. But there's a lot of stuff that is really, really sensitive and really delicate. For instance, one of the things that I think it was part of this Woodward book was that the United States had extremely good intelligence about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Like, clearly from someone inside the Kremlin who is extremely highly placed and probably senior military. Right. That kind of intelligence that, those people are just, they know their lives are at risk, and maybe some of them have even lost their lives. We'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the kind of thing that we know that kind of intelligence is just incredibly valuable, and it needs to be protected with our lives. It's like the whole bodyguard of lies that Churchill used to talk about. I mean, this is just really, really critical. And I can't think of anything that is worse, because it's not only that Trump himself has no loyalty to the United States, but he's prepared to put American lives in danger. It's just for himself.
For personal benefit. Yeah.
For his own personal benefit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with leaders, world leaders in general. And I think everyone kind of agrees that the world leaders have to have incredible egos. They have to have incredible self-confidence, bordering on, if not full-blown arrogance as well, that they are correct. They know what to do. They can steer the ship. And I think you need to have that quality, or at least a good chunk of that quality, to be able to do it. However, I find a lot of world leaders, and I'll include Biden, I'll include Trudeau, just to sort of keep it timely, and that I think there's massive ego at play, but I think there's massive ego at play for they want to be the best at taking care of their respective countries. They want to be remembered fondly. They want to be in the history books. They want to be like, you did right. Canada did right by you. US did right by you. And they want that. Whereas I feel it's pretty evident with Trump that it's really just about access and personal gain. It's just about power. That's literally all it is.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have talked about this before, before Trump was elected in 2016, it was almost like he doesn't really want this job.
No, he still doesn't want the job. No. He doesn't want to do the job.
Doesn't want to do the job. Plus, also remember saying at the time, we were chatting about it here and saying, this guy does not want this kind of microscope over his life. Like, because, it's one thing to be a sleazy, weaselly business person. But that you suddenly are open to a lot more scrutiny when you're in politics and you're playing around with taxpayer money and playing around people's lives and security and all that kind of stuff. So, I hope stuff like this adds to the weight of it. I mean, we're getting down to the wire. We're pretty much down to the wire before the election. And, I hope stuff like this plays into it for sure. Yeah. I want to do this is a terrible segue. Actually, there's no segue. It's just a jump. Just jump with me.
Jump.
That's good.
Go ahead and jump.
Oh, that was good. You went from like I can't remember the name of the band now. Oh, well, there's Van Halen at the end.
Eddie Van Halen. Yeah.
But there was something else. Anyway, doesn't matter.
David Lee Roth, Eddie Van Halen. Yeah. This is how old we are.
That's exactly it.
And I'm way older than you.
Well, we'll see. I want to talk about something that really had more of an impact on me than I thought it was going to, which was when, during the 60 Minutes interview, Kamala Harris revealed that she owns a Glock pistol, so a handgun. And upon reflection of that, my initial reflection was, well, did you think she wouldn't? It's like, no, I felt she would, but I'm just shocked, still shocked as a Canadian. I can't imagine, if Polyev or Trudeau said, no, I've got a handgun. I've fired all the time. Do I expect them to have long guns and have rifles and hunting, air quote, rifles and stuff? Sure. Absolutely. For sure. Goes along with the shtick, goes along with the pastiche and all that kind of stuff. But I would be like, I think if Polyev said, oh yeah, I've got a handgun, I think that would lose him voters, even on the conservative side. Whereas, of course, in the U.S., it was for Kamala.
It's a markup.
Yeah. It is mind-boggling to me as a Canadian.
Big tough guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get it. I cannot, because when she was asked about it, she stated she's had the Glock for quite some time due to her background in law enforcement, which is a weird answer for me to get. And not for me. Not for you. Okay. But does that mean that when her answer, like that answer to me says, I'm in law enforcement, I know that the police aren't going to save me. I know the gun laws aren't going to save me. I've got to be ready to blow some away who comes at me in my house or something. Is that what that means?
No. I took it. So, having a little bit of insight into this. And so remember, she lives in Los Angeles. She was the Attorney General. She's lived in Los Angeles for a very long time. She was the California Attorney General, both as a DA and then she had practiced as a DA, I think, in San Francisco. And before she won the Attorney General role position, and in all of that, she targeted very lethal gangs.
Right.
And she herself would have been a target. And there's no question that she herself would have been a target. And I mean, there are people who are targets in a place like Los Angeles, a gang target. There are different ways that you can take that, but it would be, in my view, entirely normal and defensible for someone like that to learn how to defend themselves with a handgun. But it's not for everybody. This is not. Don't try this at home.
Exactly.
You're not a target. You're not.
It's sad. It almost makes me sad. And again, I mean, I don't want to get into too much of a wider discussion about gun laws and attitudes towards guns, but it was like, wow, if someone at her level feels that she is her own last line of defense, that is kind of terrifying to me. That is not a ringing endorsement of the United States of America to me. That makes me think, well, this is Wild West.
Can I just mention, and I don't know if you remember when an armed intruder got through the gates at Rideau Hall, and was on the grounds for what was it, 90 minutes or something like that. Had weapons,
yes,
and there were children, and our RCMP we find him. Like it's, I don't know. I have people who are targets. There's a different kind of mentality.
Sure.
I say this having a little bit of insight into this whole world, and it's never anyway.
No, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. There are people that need to have weapon defenses at their homes around the clock. There are.
I can see that. I can see the argument made for some cases, for sure.
Yeah.
I still feel as a political leader, it's a weird thing to say. It's still, I get it. I understand from an American perspective, not that weird for her to say that.
Do you think that, and this was loudly cheered, like, whoa, like, oh, you're a tough Dave,
totally.
This is totally like LA noir, like you, anyway. But it was weird, but I wonder if because she's a woman that was part of it, that was kind of because she's playing against type.
Not for me. I don't think. I mean, I think it'd be like if Trudeau, like for example, Kamala was on doing an interview with Oprah Winfrey and mentioned that she had a handgun and said that she would shoot an intruder if someone broke into her house. That would be like if Trudeau on Colbert said, oh, no, I've got a handgun. I would shoot someone. Someone comes into, the cottage. They're getting blown away. Mm-hmm. And there's something a bit base and a bit barbaric about that, where it's like, oh, God, that's not good. Yep. And I was thinking back to...
better to talk them down, Stuart. Better to talk them down.
Well, exactly. All you've done with him, you bring out a handgun, as in my mind, is all you've done is raise the stakes. You've now raised the stakes to life or death. They might have just been at getting beat up before. I don't know. I think that's... And again, I don't want to get into this too much, but there's that whole attitude I think especially Americans have that is, if I show you I have a handgun, that should be enough for you to back off. And I think sometimes you show someone you've got a handgun and all it does is escalate the stakes to, I better shoot the other person first. That's it. And then you've escalated. You've raised your own stakes. But I think back on a more Canadian level about in 1995 when an intruder broke into Sussex, 24 Sussex, and was after Jean Chrétien. And then, of course, Aileen, Jean's wife, was waiting with a soapstone sculpture.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm taking
and remember the Queen?
Yes.
You had to talk to that guy for how long?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, as a Canadian, I like the romantic idea of protecting yourself with a soapstone sculpture a bit better than having Aileen say, no, I went to the night table and I pulled out a handgun. That's one of the most striking things to me as a Canadian about the US.
I mean, all of this, by the time you're eye to eye with an intruder, there's been a massive fail. And I have spent a lot of time on making sure that on the various ways and means to prevent anything ever happening that you're actually eye to eye with an intruder.
And it might be because, I mean, I think a big part of it's because I'm Canadian. Another big part of it is because I haven't had to face that kind of possible scenario before. I thought to myself, it's probably not something I'm ever going to have to be concerned with. So I'm not really worried about it. But it was striking as a Canadian and the Canada watching US news angle. It was one of the few things where I thought, oh, wow. Yeah. I am not American. I'm absolutely not American. That's very clear now.
I'm not there. I'm not with you on this one.
Yeah. And I just can't even.
We love everything about you. We love your smile. We love your hair. We love your punching Donald Trump, but put the gun away.
It's just, we don't have to chat about it. But I can't imagine you having, Trudeau or Poilievre saying that. I think you were saying that it might help Poilievre's chances, but I don't think it would. I think there'd be a bunch of people who'd be like, too far, man, too far. Because again, maybe it's because people are thinking, who's coming after you?
Pardon me for laughing. That's too far.
Yeah, well, I know. There's lots of things. That are too far. But in happier news, Kamala has changed her media tactic a little bit. Apart from mentioning that she's going to blow people away all the time, she's been, presenting herself in various media things, 60 Minutes, Stephen Colbert, The Howard Stern Show, Call Her Daddy, the podcast, and she's killing it. No, not to keep going with the gun jokes, but she's killing it.
She's blowing them away.
Exactly. But she's done really well, especially with the 60 Minutes interview, because 60 Minutes prides themselves on being, as much as they can be, balanced and nonpartisan. They said they were interviewing her. They also said at the beginning of the show that we listened, we wanted to interview Trump as well, but it didn't work out. He said, asked if they're going to fact check him.
Yes, no fact checking. No fact checking.
This fact checking.
Facts.
Those are your meddling facts.
That's fact up.
Exactly. I wish they'd fact off. But she did, she did really well. She differentiated herself from Trump by focusing on listening to the public and building common ground. And then she addressed accusations of policy flip-flopping. So it was a really meaty interview, and it was a really good interview, which I think
is very solid and it was it laser in on a lot of these issues. So she couldn't be accused of, being all softballs.
And I think that audience for 60 Minutes is pretty, I would think, is older and conservative.
Yeah. Or across the spectrum.
Yeah.
I would think.
But then, of course, she kind of goes from that end of the spectrum to starts working her way to the other side by going on Colbert, which is a bit more generic, but it's still very left audience for sure. But it was a chance for her to kind of be casual, be a little more relaxed, share some stories, that type of stuff. And apparently drank a beer on the show. I didn't see the clip, but apparently drank a beer.
Yes, she drank a beer.
How did they do that? Did they do it at the desk, or did they go somewhere for it?
They did it at the desk.
I take it the setup was how people want leaders they want to have a beer with. Is that the idea?
They want to be able to have a beer with, have a beer with their leader. And and she was very relaxed. And I liked the And the Howard Stern show was really good
Yeah.
too. You know, Howard Stern has become, in his as he's aged, the whole fine wines thing, he's become a really phenomenal interviewer and considered one of the best on human subjects. In fact, the interview, and he was saying, because he had Hillary on, but after the election, and he was saying, you should have come on before. I could have really moved a lot of votes for you. And that was one of her best interviews. I think Scott Galloway was saying that on the podcast. But that was probably her best, most human interview, was with Howard Stern.
Which is funny, right? Because Howard used to be quite, fringe, quite edge, and a little blue, a little crass.
A little.
Yeah, I'm being kind. I'm being kind. And that's one of the reasons I remember, like, when he became really popular in the 90s, I was like, nah, this is not I'm not in that crowd. This is not for me. It was just too much crass for crass sake. But you're right. He has become this, like, statesman-like interviewer.
A really remarkable interviewer. And I would encourage people to go and listen to his interviews. In fact, I think I was reading an interview with him when he was saying that when he jumped from FM radio or wherever he was to Sirius, that just gave him a lot more freedom, and he didn't have to have this manic chasing of everything, chasing listeners
for a while.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Colin also went on to the Call Her Daddy podcast, which
some of us have never heard of.
Thanks to Owen. Explain just what the hell that was. But I'd heard of Call Her Daddy, the podcast, before. I knew I'd read recently that she had sold. It's a young woman who runs it, and I think she's in her mid-20s, late 20s. And she sold for $125 million to Sirius XM recently, and just phenomenal amounts of money and incredible reach. Her reach is about 5 million people a week, which is, I think as you had mentioned, chatting about it, is half of Fox, which is, that's a lot of power. That's a tremendous amount of power.
That's a huge reach, and a huge reach, a targeted reach.
I would say because, Call Her Daddy is very much focused on women's issues and stuff like that, and not women's issues for the podcast, but meaning it's very much from a woman's perspective.
It's a woman's podcast.
Exactly.
A young woman's podcast and a young woman's podcast.
Yeah. And I think that audience is incredibly valuable to Kamala in this election. I mean, it seems like it should be obvious, but I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little glut of undecided voters, or people who are not even undecided, just kind of like undecided if they're going to vote.
Yeah. Well, young people haven't been voting, but this is an election that will have a huge impact for young women.
Yeah.
So, but isn't it interesting what's happening to media? And I'm fascinated with how much, back in August, when it was around the Democratic convention, and there was all of this hue and cry from like the New York Times and the major media platforms. So she's not doing interviews. She should be coming out and doing more interviews. And of course, she had a campaign to launch and get up and running in record time. But there had still been this sense that, the Washington Posts of the world and the New York Times, she still isn't doing New York Times. I don't know if she will do the New York Times.
Yeah.
I don't, the way the New York Times is conducting themselves, like,
I know. I don't know if it's worth it.
Really. What's the point? But even though they have endorsed, I believe, but still their coverage is just so dreadful. Like just yesterday, where they had two headlines side by side: Kamala Harris bobs and weaves, and Donald Trump continues his deep fascination with jeans. Like, that's called race. That's called like.
That is the kindest way to say someone's a racist. Deep concern and focus.
Genes and genetics.
Yeah.
He's kind of a bioscientist at heart.
Basically, yeah.
But anyway, I'm kind of carrying on too much about all of those fails, but we really are seeing there is a collapse of journalism And it isn't just a collapse of journalism, it's a collapse of the audience for journalism. You know, all of these, all young people are going to be laughing at us for like making this very obvious point, which is that nobody's watching these shows except oldsters who haven't learned how to turn off cable yet and just go into streaming. And there's like the audience that we thought was there. I mean, I'm old enough. I keep going on about I remember when CNN came on.
Sure.
And I remember when CNN started to get big interviews, and there was complaints about when CNN got big interviews from old school media, from the media broadcast networks. So we're just watching a complete shift. But I think Harris is just getting better and better at this, and she's clearly very relaxed. She should go do Joe Rogan. She should go right into the lion's den and do it.
I agree, because it's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt anything.
What does she have to lose? She's got nothing to lose.
Because that's not her people, and so who cares? And she, at the worst case, she's going to convince some people that she's not too bad. Maybe they should vote for her.
Yeah, or not vote.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think what's interesting with the shift in media, just to touch on that briefly, is that it's about trust, especially for younger audiences. It's about trust. And this is what seems to be missing from the decision-making of a lot of shareholders and executives at bigger networks and bigger news media organizations, is they think it's very expensive to keep this trusted news anchor. We'll just get we'll just replace them with somebody else. It's all you're doing is reading the news. It's like, well, that's not what they're doing. There's a trust factor there. And if someone says, like Bob Woodward, as an example, not as a journalist or an anchor, but as someone you trust, you think, no, if he said it, I'm going to assume it's correct until I find out otherwise, unless I find out otherwise, rather.
Yeah.
And that's the huge value for doing things like Call Her Daddy, because you've got someone like Alex Cooper, the host, who's built up this trust with her audience, which is very, very new media, very, very parasocial, very, very social media based. I mean, that's one of the things, certainly in what I do, is that it's based on trust. And we work with a brand or something.
And it's based on personality. Your personality is your brand.
Because you and I, we're chatting, and if my face is on your screen and I tell you something stupid or I lie to you, you're done with me. You don't need me anymore. There's a million other ones. But if I'm trustworthy, then there's a relationship that's built there. Yeah. That's what I think the media is.
And it's one of the things that is so worrying, of course, is that there are all of these sources that are not trustworthy and are giving out terrible disinformation all the time. And it's just a cacophony out there. But all credit to Alex Cooper. And what's remarkable to me is how much she raised her own profile with a whole demographic that had never heard of her, didn't know anything about her. She did a hell of a job with that interview. And a lot of people were very, very impressed with her skills on that. And she worked really hard on that interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
To develop it. Yeah.
So is this going to, all these media appearances and stuff, are they going to tip the scales even more for her or for Kamala? Is it going to be, does it matter? Is it just sort of like adding grains of sand, or is it?
I think it's really important for her to get out there and be seen a lot more. I think the more that she's seen, every one of these outings has been she's shown a degree of comfort, I would say, that's kind of remarkable. She just seems like a natural. It's so funny because I just think that she has somehow found her moment. She has found her mojo. This is not the Kamala Harris that we saw in 2020.
No.
She's in her zone. She's comfortable with where she is. The issues are lining up in a way that she can hit those balls out of the park. And I just think there's no downside. And the more she has to be seen more. She has to be seen by more people who get comfortable with her. And yeah.
I agree. I think it goes back to that trust thing as well. Just the nature of media currently and the various mediums that we're consuming that media on. Trust is and authenticity is so important for people. I think that makes the make or break. We're going to finish off with a little segment. We're going to ask you a question. seeing as we've got Kamala appearing in all these different shows, here's the question. What is the worst show that Trump could appear on? Let's start there.
The View.
Oh, I think you'd actually be quite good on The View. I think it'd be good. Is Joy Behar still on there? They could fight.
What do you think? Rosie O'Donnell. What do you think would be a bad show for him to be on?
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood would be a terrible show for him to be on. He would go on. He would find out how little the Mr. Rogers is paying to stay in his house. He would probably find a way to buy up the block and the victim. And then he would just, the only thing he'd like about Mr. Rogers is the fact that he's white. That's it. That's all.
Yeah. And look how tiny that King Friday is. Or it is.
There's too much symbolism. It would hit too close to home for him there, probably. What is the worst show that Kamala Harris could be on? Doesn't have to be a news show. Could be anything.
I'm stumped if it's not a news, because I feel like right now she's kind of like really in the zone. I don't know what could. What do you think?
Dancing with the Stars. That'd be a terrible show for her to be on right now. If she did that right before the election.
Or The Voice. The Voice, maybe.
Exactly. She doesn't need a competition show right now. She's already in a competition.
America's Got Talent.
We'll save that for somewhere down the line after she's done, 8 years. Then we'll see.
Yeah.
Then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Those are good answers. That's all right. Well, listen, that was a good conversation. And thanks so much to everyone for watching and or listening. We greatly appreciate it. Of course, you can find us at CanadaWatchingUSNews.com, where you can subscribe with your email address and you'll get an email notification every time there's a new episode. And if you're a paid subscriber, hey, thanks. That's great. Keeps people like our producer Owen and our video editor Lisa.
Subscribe, you guys.
That's right. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
The audio version of Canada Watching U.S. News was produced, engineered, and edited by Owen Reynolds. The video version of the podcast was edited by Lisa Cumming. Our theme music is by Owen Reynolds. You can find past episodes and more at CanadaWatchingUSNews.com or your favorite podcast platform.